Hello everyone and happy Bookshop Day. This time last year I got in a bus crash while doing Bookshop Day. It was lovely. I was okay to be, if you want to hear more about that, I'll link the video below. But I basically followed a bus route around North London and explored a lot of local indie bookshops that I'd never been to before. This year I want to talk about some books that I've recently bought at bookshops. But just a little reminder that if you go into a bookshop on or around Bookshop Day, there's a chance that you can pick up a Books on My Bag. This is this year's design, very Halloween themed. If you're getting in the mood for that already. Just to quickly preface this assorted collection of books that I've bought recently at bookshops. When I worked as a bookseller in a children's bookshop from the age of 16 upwards to about maybe 20, one of the things I really loved is having read so much of what was on the shelves and having a real sense of what was coming in and coming out, interactions with customers, which made me understand what people liked and what people were looking for, but also working alongside incredible booksellers who knew the stock really well. So sometimes when you didn't know about something or know what kind of book someone would like, you'd have all of these other peer mentors really who'd read wonderful things and could tell you and could ask you questions about what you'd read that would help them. And it's that perspective that I think really draws me to physical bookshops, because I have interactions with people who've read far more than I have and also have been around people who've also read quite a lot. So they have that shared knowledge that they pass on with each other. And I think that kind of institutional knowledge is something that we can overlook a lot of the time in favour of what is going to pop the most or sell the most or be on trend the most. And the things that find their way to the front of online experiences aren't always the things that you'll find in the dusty corner of a bookshop, or the weird one that the weird book that someone's fallen in love with and has created a whole table display around, but that might not be linked to the profitability of that book going forward. It's just a book that they really, really love, and it gets harder and harder, especially in a city like London where rents are so high, to be able to run these businesses. But also these businesses pay their taxes and do all of the legal things that all companies should do. So I really, really believe in supporting them. So that's my little preamble to them. The first book I want to talk about is kind of related to that. It's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel by Alexander Chee, which I posted a lot about on Instagram. Kind of off Instagram at the moment, but before I read this and just loved every moment of it. It's a collection of personal essays by Alexander Chee, and each one was so moving and narrative and very emotional as well. I found the whole experience of reading this an emotional one. I dipped in and out. I would read a couple of essays at a time, think about them and come back to them. And I've been doing that more and more with my reading lately. I think I've mentioned that in a previous video, that I'm reading in some ways more slowly than I ever have, because I go to a book, read a little bit, think about it, come back to it, or reread as I'm reading them. I think sometimes you can think of collections of essays as discordant with one another, like they don't have a thread through them, but this is a very threaded essay. There's imagery that comes up again and again, whether that's because it's part of Alexander Chee's life or because it's just the way that this collection has been organised and edited and come together. There's an essay called The Rosary, which is probably one of my favourite pieces of writing of all time. I'm still going back to it. This collection was also very meaningful to me on a very personal level. It talks a lot about therapy, and also Chee lost his dad when he was relatively young, and those are things that I can relate to. And it also talks about the process of writing and the fact of writing, and also time of writing, how long it takes, being surrounded by people who are wildly successful, as I am, and who have these markers who've written books and published them, friends who are my age who've written books and published them, and feeling how intimidating that is for me, and how sometimes that shuts down my sense of myself as a writer. And he writes about that, being in New York surrounded by writers, and his image of himself and what his career would be, and how that doesn't necessarily match up, and it makes you sometimes focus on the less important thing. He did the Iowa Writers Workshop, and he got to be taught by Annie Dillard. What would you read to someone who was dying? Annie Dillard had asked our class. She wanted this to be the standard for our work. There, at the memorial service for my friend, I thought of another. Dying, what stories would you tell? I think of this friend whenever I am reminded of the abandoned projects I have in my office, going back for years. This essay was one of them. Being a writer can feel a lot like writing and giving up on writing at the same time. So that's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel by Alexander Chee. I finally read the winner of the Women's Prize in American Marriage by Tayari Jones, which was absolutely stunning. I loved every moment of this novel. It's about a young couple who've been married for about a year or so when the husband is arrested in the middle of the night for a crime he didn't commit. I love the structure of this novel. It's told at points in chapters strictly from one character's perspective and then the other character's perspective, challenging the way you looked at something, which is a format I always love. And there are also portions of the novel that are written entirely in letters. It's really beautiful, extremely sad and frustrating and angering, and you manage to feel absolute empathy, I think, for everyone in the novel, and really get a sense of absolutely how painful this is. But it is also a very funny book in places. I was so moved by it as well. This has kind of been a season of me being really moved by what I read, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. The next book I picked up at a bookshop is one I've been wanting to read for a long time, which is The Uninhabitable Earth, A Story of the Future by David Wallace Wells, which is about climate change and what can happen, what we know, and why we don't know what we don't know. And the short of the last one, why we don't know what we don't know, is because we don't know yet what we will do. We don't yet know how we will rise to the challenge, and that's why it's hard to really delineate exactly what's going to happen. There are some things that are more likely than others, like it's extremely likely that the Marshall Islands will disappear and that Miami Beach will disappear and things like that, but it's hard to know all of the other factors of it. The book also looks back at the conversation so far in places where it might have taken a different turn, and how also certain things have become normalised, and why, for instance, the conversation around climate change so often focuses on sea level rising. I really loved how Wallace Wells framed the climate crisis and talked about all the different elements of it, including like what happens to the human body when it rises above certain levels of heat, why certain places are affected by things more than others. There's discussion here also about how the refugee crisis is completely interwoven with the climate crisis. It draws a lot from like Didion talking about the fires near her home and the wildfires of California in the 70s, and contextualizes that too, like why is that different from what's happening now and what could happen next. I definitely empathize with the feeling that like we are taking on so much information all at once and often from screens, and that can be particularly overwhelming, and there's just it's hard to have a sense of exactly what's going on and exactly what we should be doing, and I completely empathize with that, which is why sometimes I really like reading books about contemporary issues that I don't really know that much about on like a scientific level. Like I know the facts about them, but I don't really understand them in context of why they're so particularly important, and books having that time to sit and read and absorb the context and think about it for a dedicated amount of time, I think they're a really good way to do that and to ways into those issues. So I'd really recommend The Uninhabitable Earth. I really liked it. Another book I really liked on the climate crisis was The Water Will Come by Jeff Goodall. On a thoroughly different note, I then read my first Anais Nin, which was A Spy in the House of Love. I then read Little Birds, which I didn't like as much because half the stories, like there's erotica and then there's, oh yes, this one disturbed me. But I feel like everyone else had read Anais Nin before I had. It's 1950s in New York, and she loves sex, but she also really loves her partner, Alan, and she feels like she is constantly performing. She's having to hide part of herself to be with her partner who she loves, but she doesn't want to also devastate him. But then she has these very intense sexual experiences with a lot of other men in New York. I also have read a lot of modernism from that time, like Good Morning Midnight and Nightwood, books like that I really loved. I took a brilliant class at Vassar when I did my year abroad that introduced me to a lot of those books, and this definitely fits in that genre overall. It kind of, I felt like when I was reading it, like it was speaking to all of these other books that I'd read, which I really liked. And sometimes, like towards the end of this, quite literally, there's a conversation with another author. This is really short, it's 116 pages. It fit very nicely into a bum bag that I had. So it was great because I had my bum bag, my phone and my charger, and I walked around feeling light and unencumbered, and it was wonderful. I just loved how much time we spent inside Sabina's head. Like I love how much time we spent with her, walking the city, feeling things, reacting to things, responding to things. You see the world from inside her head. You don't really see her as much from the outside. And you see people through her eyes, which aren't always, you know, benevolent, loving, giving, pure. She says things that are judgmental and harsh and strange sometimes, as we all do, and the sense of really trying to work out who she is, but finding refuge in this actress persona as well. The next book I bought at a bookshop was one that you'll know about, which was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I took the cover off because I actually prefer it without the cover. It's got this nice stamp, and I really like the spine. I really like the text of it. I really liked The Testaments, and it's been funny because as time goes on, I speak to more and more people who actually didn't like it very much. What I particularly liked was just being in that world and finding the frictions within it, the responses to power within it, and also understanding more of the backstory. Like, I've always loved that about Handmaid's Tale, both the book but then also the adaptation, is kind of understanding what happened before, like what led to this, and I think that's been a preoccupation of many of our minds. Also, like with all dystopia, I think the moment that I find most fascinating is when you're so within the world but then you also get hints of what came before. I think Station 11 does that very well. Station 11 being a book that initially I wasn't head over heels for, and then the more I reread it, the more I absolutely fall in love with it. I really liked The Testaments, and also I love the tone of her writing. I think that's what brings me back to Atwood again and again. I just adore how she writes. I like it when she's telling me a story. I fall into the characters that she writes, absolutely. I'll probably find time to read it again, maybe after rereading Handmaid's Tale. The final book I want to talk about, which I bought at a bookshop recently, which is my current absolute obsession, and all of my friends are sick to death of me talking about it, but my god, will they just read it so we can talk about it. It's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. This book is excellent, and it's now out in paperback, so you can carry it around with you wherever you go. I read every single page of this about 2 or 3 times as I'm reading it. It's just brilliant. For me, it has given me language for feelings that I've had, anxieties I've had, and also concerns, and I don't know, just like any other big dark word around the contemporary social internet and how we use it and how we feel like we need to use it. And that's not really the entirety of what this is about. This is more about kind of the structure of the internet and how it's structured and how that's been allowed to happen too, like legally. How have companies been allowed to completely infringe upon all of our privacies and then get away with it and make it feel normal to the point that we actually go from being horrified about something to a year or 2 later feeling actually quite fine about it. And also what we can do, because I think that's one of the most important things about this book, is it really takes apart the idea that this is all inevitable and that this is out of our control, and the inevitability is part of what's happening with the internet, and soon we'll all upload our consciousnesses and walk around with fake skin. Like, yes, that's inevitable. And I don't think it is, and this book doesn't think it is either, and that was helpful to me too. I want to make another video about this, but by God, I know I promise a lot of videos I haven't made, but if you're looking for a non-fiction read on Bookshop Day that you will want to then press into the hands of every single person you know, and also I think this is going to be a great Christmas gift too, just a nice, happy, relaxing Christmas present, then I would recommend it, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Please read it, and then we'll talk about it. I wanted to quickly mention the poetry collection Night Sky with Exit Wounds, because I bought that the other day and haven't finished it yet, but it's stunning. Like, honestly, one of the best poetry collections I think I've ever read. I found this because Sarah Kay tweeted a poem of Ocean Vuong's that I adored, and I then kind of read as many poems as I could online, and then found the poetry book in a bookshop and was so glad. And yeah, I kind of need to process this one a bit, but I want to read more poetry, and my friends have just launched Ars Poetica with the Poetry Foundation, which I'm really excited about. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll link it in the description. It's a wonderful project where familiar voices, familiar people, poets included, will read their favourite poems or sometimes a poem they've written, and talk a little bit about why it means so much to them. And it's just so well made, and I'm so excited for when there are like tens and hundreds of poems up there that people can peruse over and discover that actually they do really love poetry. So that's just a quick poetry rec. I also just wanted to quickly mention that I got Book of Dust number 2, The Secret Commonwealth, which just came out on Thursday, and I got to go to an event on Wednesday with Philip Pullman, which was wonderful. I'm still just beaming out about, as you can tell, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet because it's been a really busy week. So that's what the rest of this day is going to be dedicated to. Yes, happy Bookshop Day. Support your local bookshops. Tell me about your local bookshop in the comments, and also I would love to hear if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, or if you have any recommendations for me and for other people based on any of the books I've mentioned. I just said mentioned a lot. Anyway, great. Talk to you soon. Bye.